Martian rights are. Right, or the Martian provisions of Badel says if the patent holder is not appropriately releasing in like the products that was developed with government money, if it's not making it accessible to the public, then the government can march in and pull back the patent and release it or license it to someone else who will.
Yeah. There may be contexts in which the government needs to couple that, like where the court, for example, might decide that a set of decisions have been made in reliance on being able to continue profiting from that patent, and so they might then be like, you need to compensate them in some way. I don't know enough about the details of the intersection between these things to know when or how that would be true or whether it even ever is, but yeah, like the government can do what the government wants to do.
And isn't like the COVID thing is a perfect example?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. March provisions and COVID, both great examples.
Do you want to talk about that, or do you want?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, you just mean vaccines, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, like, absent there having been pandemic, presumably mRNA vaccines would not have been as much a priority to try and produce in the first place. But if hypothetically they had been, then companies would have been presumably like buying and selling that, or like would have been a handful of companies, or potentially just one, would have been selling them for large amounts of money. They presumably would not have been presumably accessible for a while. In the context of COVID, the government stepped in and was like, we need a bunch of vaccines. You're going to produce a bunch of vaccines. You're going to make them available. We will pay you a lot of money, but you are going to like make them available, and you kind of can't really negotiate with us about this. Is that what you mean, or is there something more specific?
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
How does that work with like compulsory licensing or like trips? Like,
Good.
I know that was also a COVID thing, but like different than just paying people to do something.
Yeah. So compulsory licensing, let's bracket for now. Trips. Do you want to give folks a TLDR of what that is?
I don't know
aware?
what countries are in it, but it's an alliance that they basically came to an agreement that these countries could say, hey, no, that isn't licensed anymore, I get it, to do for like emergency situations like COVID, etc. But it wasn't really practically exercised because when a lot of countries who needed to, and I think India tried to, a lot of countries threatened them, like under the provisions of TRIPS, a lot of countries threatened them with sanctions.
Yeah.
That kind of.
Yeah. So it's a international trade agreement specific to the IP context. That I agree fully with your summary or characterization of it there, and is one of several. So there are other like. What they care about and in what ways differs, but there are several other international agreements too that we're being aware of. There's the Berne Convention. There's also the Paris Convention, not that Paris, or like not that Paris agreement, the other, like different Paris agreement, not the climate one, different one. But so in the context of patent law, but also copyright and trademarks, there are several international agreements that, like over time in general, there's been a pretty strong trend toward increased harmonization and interoperability in different countries, like intellectual property regimes, which makes sense for a bunch of different reasons, right? So the motivation for TRIPS, like was said a minute ago, is primarily how do we ensure that in emergency situations that we're able to get the things produced and to the places in the world where they need to be, which is a thing that every country in the world has a stake in. At the same time, every country that's producing major innovations and manufacturing them also has a stake in. We want to ensure that the way in which that occurs isn't sort of arbitrary and depriving our companies of a bunch of the revenue they should be receiving from some of this stuff. Because again, that could, first and foremost, because if that were to be the case, it could collapse the incentive for them to be producing or innovating on those things to begin with. there are similar concerns, albeit I think a little bit less salient in some ways for stuff like copyright and trademark and stuff. And so in general, over time, there's been a steady trend toward increased cooperation on these issues. Another major upside of this is that it makes it much easier for investors in any given part of the world to have a solid understanding of what rules are going to govern the companies and the innovations produced and marketed by the companies that they're investing in other parts of the world, right? So there's another large incentive for countries to get involved in doing this so that they can kind of unlock increased pools of foreign investment. Also, if you want to ensure that, like, innovative American company or person X is able to, especially without like the need to spend tons of money hiring lawyers from each individual country around the world or whatever, is able to kind of confidently file a patent in other countries to be able to sell stuff there or whatever. You also want the rules to be like relatively uniform. So again, lots of differences and variation across countries, and the patent protections given by a given country are territorially bounded. But it is worth being aware of this kind of trend toward increased international harmonization, both because it's like an important thing going on, and also as a theme that people are likely to reap some advantages about, might read an app about, whatever. But also because, as we'll talk about when we talk about the resolutional phrasing later, this topic set uses the phrase domestic. And so I do think that there will absolutely be a popular negative generic argument that is like, do it multilaterally instead, which we'll kind of talk about the details of more in a bit.
BK, it's been an hour and a half. Well, okay.
How are countries compelled to follow rules under trips like the COVID-19 tech waiver? Like, how are they compelled to follow them?
What do you mean?
Like, who makes them follow, like,
Did you say company or country?
a country? Like,
Well, I mean, no one. Like, they have to have decided to join that treaty.
okay.
Wouldn't that be WTO? I guess like under TRIPS, it's just like it requires all member states to abide by certain laws. I guess so that is a regulatory international body.
Sure, but still in the sense that, so yes, and that's a good point. But like, still fundamentally, like, if a country is like, we're going to not do that, we're going to withdraw from the WTO or whatever, it's like, fine. But yeah, I mean, like, to DJ's point, like, there are very strong, clear incentives, like with any treaty or any treaty regime. There are clear upsides to countries being able to expect that one another are going to follow rules in general, and participation in these particular, like, one important element of that that is worth voicing, given that, like, so the WTO is the World Trade Organization. TRIPS is part of that broader kind of multilateral trade framework. And so if I were to be like, I'm going to not adhere to the set of TRIPS provisions, it's like, it's easy for me as another country to then be like, okay, well, we are going to response, like, tariff this set of goods or whatever. It's like, there are clear costs to that. Other questions? Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. Take a 5-minute, take a 10-minute break. Then when you get back, we're going to talk about non-obviousness and a couple of other kind of constraints or exceptions to patent law. And then I'm going to chat with the lab leaders and stuff here in a minute. We'll either briefly survey copyright and trademark and then do a very truncated version of the, like, here it is applied to resolution, or we'll revisit copyright and trademark later and go straight to the resolution piece. Like, all right, be back at 10:40. Turns out there is lunch talk time.
Well, done. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, this is great. That's a lot of